So we're going to set up our character that we created in Maya to animate it, and to do that, it's what we call rigging. So we're basically setting up a skeletal system with joints and then attaching that to the mesh, which is like the skin, and binding them together, and then just setting up keyframes to move it around. So I'll put a link to this on the course page, but this is a great 3D interactive view of the human skeleton. You can also hover over different bones or click on them and see what they're called. So this is a really great tool. If you're not doing a human-like creature, I know a lot of you are doing dogs, it would be a good idea to just look at the skeleton of whatever kind of animal you're using. If you're using something that doesn't exist in reality, you can kind of make up where your bones and joints will live. But just think about the curve of the skeleton here, of the spine here, which is kind of the most important thing to think about for what we're doing, and think about where your character is going to bend and move. And this is just going to be a simple setup. So the rigging that we're doing is just making it easier for us to animate. It's setting us up so we can animate it. So first, we're going to create a layer for the character. So the character exists on its own layer, and we're going to lock that layer so we don't mess with it. So you can make sure you select the whole thing, and then in your channel box layer editor over here on the right, it's in the layers. This last button here, it's like a little piece of paper with a circle over it, create new layer. And you can just call it your character name and press save. And then this, you can turn it on and off, but this last button here, we want to turn to R, which will show us the rendered view of it, but which will lock it so we can't mess with it because we're going to be making a bunch of joints in here. Okay, so we're going to start with the legs. We're going to build joints for the legs. So you want to come into the side view. So if you click on your 4-panel view here, click on the side one and press the space bar. And you can zoom out a little bit. And if you want to scroll down, you can press this 2D pan zoom tool here. Okay. So we're going to start at the top, and when you're creating joints, it does matter where you start and where you end, because where you start is going to be the base of the joint. So for the legs, we're going to start at the top, and then with the spine, we're going to start at the bottom of the spine of the base of it. So to create a joint, you want to come up here to your rigging mode, and there's two ways to do it. You can either come into your rigging shelf, and there's a tool here that is to create joints, and you can also go to skeleton, create joints. I'm just going to click on the tool, and you can see that the tool is active here, and you just click to start. So we're going to start, imagine where the hip socket would be. So I'm going to start here, and then I'm going to do another one for the knee, and you may add more edge loops in yours to make it bend better. And then I'm going to do another one for the ankle and another for like the toes. So once you have that, if you can't see through it, you want to come to shading and make sure that X-ray joints is checked. I also have my wireframe shaded on so I can see where all my polygons and edge loops are, so I can see where it will bend the best. And you can move around your joints now. If you go into the selection tool and then click on the move tool, which is W, when you're on the top, you can see the top one controls everything, and then you can click on a lower one and move that around. And you know, the knee will have a little bend to it. You can move it down. You can also delete them. So if you come into your outliner, if you don't see that, you go to Windows, Outliner, and this will pop up here. You can see that this joint was created. You can open it up and you can see all of the joints. You can click on one. When you click on one and delete it, it'll click everything below it. So I'm clicking on this ankle one and deleting, and it clicks everything below. Then to add more, I can just click on this joint, go back into the Create Joint tool. I'm going to click on it again, so the one I want to start from is highlighted, and then I'm going to go ankle, foot, and make sure that they're attached. I click on here, that looks pretty good, and make sure when I move one, it moves the others. That looks good. Okay, so we are going to name these, and we're going to name them left and right. If we come into panels, orthographic, front, just make sure, I'm gonna grab this and make sure it's actually in the leg. And so the top one, we're gonna call hip underscore L for left. So it's the left side of the actual character, so that when we're in the perspective view, we don't get confused. And then this will be knee underscore L for left, because we're gonna have both sides. And I'll call this ankle underscore L. And yours might have more or less depending on what your character looks like. Toes underscore L. So we have that all set up. And you can adjust these and take your time to get them looking good. And now you can see when I click on one, let me get into the perspective view so you can see a little better. I can click on one and go to the rotate tool, and it rotates, but it's not moving the character yet because we haven't binded the skin. So we're gonna build the whole skeleton, then put them together, and then we'll bind it. Okay, we're going to make the other leg. So we just have to mirror the joints. So I'm gonna come back into my front view. I went to the 4-panel view, clicking on the front panel and pressing the space bar. I want to be selected with my selection tool on the top hip here. And I'm going to go to skeleton mirror joints, but I want to make sure to click on this option box, the square box that's here. Don't just click where it says mirror joints, click to open up the options here. And you want to mirror across the YZ axis. And this is a really nice tool. It's going to replace the name with something else. So I could put, if I had named my joints hip underscore left, I could write search for left and replace with right. I'm just doing the letters L and R for left and right. So Maya's gonna search for everything, every joint with the letter L in it, it's gonna replace that letter L with R for right. So then just press mirror, and you can see that this was created, and they're the same names, except instead of the letter L, it says the letter R, which is very handy. So I'm gonna come into the move tool here, it's W on your keyboard, and just set this up. And we can take a look and make sure it looks okay. It should be fine. Okay, and then the next thing we're gonna do is create the spine, and then we will parent the spine to the legs. So I'm gonna come into my side view, so panels, there's a couple ways to get here. I'm just showing you the different ways. Panels, orthographic, side. And remember our skeleton, that there's a little curve in the spine and the neck goes forward a little bit more. So we're gonna do the spine and the head and neck. Okay, and we're gonna start at the base of the spine. So remember, it matters where you start it. So when you're starting the spine, you're gonna start at the bottom and we're gonna move up through the head. Now this isn't gonna be completely anatomically correct. It's just a simple rig that we're creating to make our character move. So come into your create joints, and we're gonna start right above the hip. You can turn your wireframe on so you can see where your lines are. So we're gonna start right above the hip, and then that will be like the base of the spine, and then you can do another one where like maybe the belly would be, and then one that's kind of at chest height. And then we want one right at the neck, and we want one for the base of the head, because think about how it's gonna turn and rotate. One for the back of the head, and this is a little weird, but we're gonna do one all the way to the nose. So even if your character doesn't have as big a nose as mine, you wanna add that in. And then you can move stuff around. You know, important ones are the neck, getting that right. You probably won't move the chest that much, but remember, if you move one, you kind of have to adjust the others. And you can start to set it up. get it looking where you think it will look good for your specific character. Get this in the right place. You can even move this one up a little more. All right, so it's all set up. I'm going to make sure that the spine is centered because I don't think it is. So I'm going to come into the front view. I'm going to click on the base here and move it to the center. And then I'm going to open up all the joints in here that we just made, and I'm going to name them before we go any further. So this is the base. I'll call the second one the belly. I'm actually going to call this base spine. This one is the chest. This one is the neck. Then this one was the head base. And this one was the back of the head. Head, back. And then the last one was the nose. So just staying organized is really important here so you know what everything is. Okay, so now we're gonna do what we call parenting because we want these to all be attached, right? So they move together. So we're gonna parent the legs to the spine. So it's really simple. You just click on the top of the hip, the joint that's connecting all of them so that all of them are selected. And then you hold Shift and click on the spine. And then you press the letter P on the keyboard, P for parent. And you can see here this arrow that's created that's connecting them. When we click on the spine, it will show that they're all connected and the arrow is pointing to the leg. So the spine is the parent pointing to the child. So we click on the other leg, hold Shift, click on the base of the spine and press P again. Now when we click on the base of the spine, we see that it's connected to everything, and you can see here in the outliner that there's lines showing those connections, how they're parented and connected to each other. All right, let's move on to the arms. I think we're in the front view, right? So for the arms, we're gonna make a clavicle that comes out of the chest joint. So I'm going to click on the chest joint here, see where that is, and the clavicle is the bone that goes up to your shoulder here. So I'm going to click on the Create Joint tool. I'm going to click on this chest joint again, so it's selected. I want that selected, and then I'm going to click for the clavicle and make sure that they're connecting here. I want one right at the shoulder. I want one in the elbow, one in the wrist, and another for the hand. And again, yours might be a little bit different. So we can open these up and we can name them. The first one was the clavicle. The second one was shoulder. Oh, and we want to make sure to name these with the side because we're going to mirror them again. So I'm going to call it clavicle L for left side. This one's going to be shoulder _ L for left side. This one is elbow left. This one is wrist left. And this one is hand left. Okay, I'm going to come to the top view. So panels, orthographic, top, and I knew this was going to be a little bit off, so it's always good to be checking. So I'm coming into the Move tool, I'm clicking on the clavicle one, coming into the Move tool. I'm sorry, let me get into the Selection tool first, click on the clavicle, go to the Move tool, and just get that set up there. Okay. Now we can come back, take a look. Okay, and if you click on the chest here, you can see that they're connected, and if I click on the base of the spine, you can see that that's connected to everything. Okay, I'm gonna grab the clavicle here, and we're gonna mirror the arm. So I'm selected on the clavicle, that first joint that I made for the arm, and I'm going to skeleton, mirror joints again, clicking on the box to get the options up, and it should show the last thing you have. So you want Y to Z, mirror across, and you want to change everything with the L to replace it with R for the right side, and we do mirror. And let's just check. We can see that they're all connected here, but I just want to check the base of the spine. Everything's connected. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is bind this skeleton with the skin of the character. So I'm clicking on the skin, I'm holding Shift, clicking on the spine, and you can just hold Shift and click all the way down. So my character mesh is selected, the whole mesh, then all of my joints are selected, and then we just come up to skin, bind skin. You give it a minute to work, and then you can see, remember before when we rotated, and it changes it to very nice colors. Before when we rotated, the character didn't move with the joints, but now we can come into the rotate tool, and we get these big rotation options here. And, well, that one's not going to show as much. It's going to bend the character mesh for us. I'm going to turn off this wireframe because I think it's a little distracting. And we can select on here and turn the head, turn it this way. So you can really see how when you set these up, you can adjust it a lot. And you know, this is a really simple one. There's a lot more advanced stuff you can do with this, but this is a simple rigging setup that can get you started animating a simple character. Okay, so if you want to import your background, you should put it into your file. So let me go. So remember, you set up your project, and you should copy and paste your background file into your scene folder in the project that you set up the last time, so that you have both the model and the background there. And then you can just go to File, Import, and you can choose your background and import it. And you can play with the scale, do all kinds of stuff. You can also add some lights, you know, add some point lights here, and you can use the move tool to move those around, and you can come into the attribute editor and you can increase the intensity, and you can rotate the light and really get that looking good and play around with that. You can test what that looks like in your renderer when you come to this little clipboard with the eye. And one thing that some people were having trouble with, you want it to be in Maya Hardware 2.0, and you want to go to Render, Renderer Current. And you can see I have a little more work to do with my lighting. I probably should add another light on the other side, so I'll do Create Lights, Point Light, move this to the other side. So just get your scene lit up. Your background might have better lighting than I have in here, but just make sure it looks good. And every time I come in here, I'm going to have to select this again to get the new view of it. Okay, so spend time making your lighting look great. Now we are going to animate it. One thing about animating in Maya is that you're going to have to set a key for each joint that you move. So let's come to the animation drop down here, and you can go to Key, Set Key. Because all of these were selected, it set all the joints there. So now I'm going to move the time indicator down, and I'm going to come into the rotate tool, and I'm going to move the arm. And before I move anything else, I want to go to Key, Set Key, or press S. And you can see all these turn red, which means there is a keyframe on them. Then if I wanted to move this arm at the same time, I'm gonna come and make my adjustments, and you can see there's no red here, and then I press S and those all turn red, so I know that a keyframe has been formed here. And then I can move the head and make sure to press S to set that keyframe. Okay, it looks like I didn't set up my first keyframe, so I'm just gonna come down, come here, and get those keyframes set. So I'm gonna move the head back a little, press S to make sure to set these up. I'm gonna move the arm, press S every time I make a change to a joint. I'm gonna press S again. So now I'm gonna test it here. There we go. It's a little spazzy, so you might give yours some more space. You can keep on moving the time indicator down and adjusting. That one's not so great. Maybe we can twist. You can twist the body, press S. Maybe you want to bend the knee, press S, and keep it really simple. You can do like a little wave or a wiggle, press S every time. Maybe I want to move the shoulder down and press S every time I make a change. You are going to spend time making your keyframes, just making it super simple, and then I want to show you how to render quickly. So in Maya, you can test the render before you actually render it. So we can come into rendering mode here, and we can go to render settings. You can also get there with this little clapboard with like the gear shift on it. And you want the image format to be PNG. We want the frame animation extension, and it's not a single frame, that is what we were doing before. We want it this one with the number sign. We want the frame range. This you're gonna have to change. It's gonna start at frame 1 and end at frame 20. That's as long as you need for this project. You can go longer, but you know, this is as much as you need. Then you want the renderable camera to be perspective. Unless you have set up another camera, that's fine. And then for the preset, since we're just testing it, you can make it pretty low res, the 640 by 480. And then we want to come to render sequence. This is how we're going to test it, and you want to check on the box here to get the options up. And you want to make sure render all layers is on. If you have multiple cameras, you can check that, and then check these 3 at the bottom. And we can go to render sequence and close. We'll get a little pop-up, and it will work. So now we can kind of get an idea of what our movement is going to look like. And I needed to obviously fix some of my keyframes, but you're going to spend more time on yours. So you can do that before you render the whole thing. Okay, so to actually render, the only thing we're going to change on here is you want to make this HD at least 720. You can make it HD 720 or 1080, up to you. It'll just take longer with the 1080. And then we want to make sure we set the project. So you want this path here to be into your project file for images. So if your path is not set up, you just come to File, Set Project, and make sure you're choosing the project and the images folder and setting it. I'm going to press cancel because mine was already set up. So you can check that by looking here in your render settings, the path. See, it's going into my folder that I want it to go into the images folder. And we have it all set up. And then we come up to render, and we go to batch render to actually render it. It's going to show it's working on the bottom here. And when it's done, it's going to show up in your images folder that you set it in as the same thing we've been doing in Lightwave, all of these ping files, and then you're going to bring it into Premiere Pro the same way and import it as an image sequence. So don't forget to check that image sequence box, and then you'll just export it the same exact way we've been doing in Premiere Pro. Export it as an MP4 file, and you'll save that final MP4 to the M drive. And just remember to keep it simple. You don't need a lot of detail. You don't need it to be moving a lot. A little bit of a wiggle or a wave is perfectly fine. But do spend some time getting the lighting looking good and setting up your composition, because I think that's important. But just get it to move a little bit. All right, have fun.